Hey y'all, welcome to the My Place podcast. I'm your host, Mary McSwain. I'm joined, as I normally am, by my dad, Jay McSwain. And we also have a very, very special guest with us today that I have been so excited to have.
I've been excited too.
We've both been excited.
Okay.
We've both been excited.
And I've been excited.
I'm so glad, Mr. J.
If y'all are long-term listeners of the podcast or you've gone through our archives before, you might recognize her from an earlier podcast that we did years and years ago, your debut. Mm-hmm. And now we've come back for a second round. We've invited you back because you were so good the first time. We had to have you back. But Hannah's one of my best friends. We grew up together at First Redeemer and did life together and then went our separate ways in college. But still to this day, you are one of my best friends. Yeah. So why don't you tell everyone a little bit about who you are and what they should know about you?
Oh, also, if you go back in the archives of some of our previous episodes, because there are numerous times that you've talked about Hannah.
Oh yeah, I talk about you all the time.
This isn't not the one that she did back 4 years ago, but in the last year, you're probably in 3 or 4 podcasts. So there you go.
Exciting.
Yeah.
All right, but you asked her to tell a little bit about her.
Yeah. So give us a profile.
Got it.
Who are you? What are you about? What should people know?
Amazing. Well, as you said, my name is Hannah Payton. I just graduated from Liberty University. I got a nursing degree from there, and I'm about to start actually in a month a new job working as a pediatric nurse up in Virginia, not far from where I went to school. So I'll be working on a unit that is sort of twofold. It's an acute care unit, which means I'm taking care of kids once they get moved into the hospital from the emergency department. And then the other half of my unit is our oncology unit. So that means I'll be working with kids who have been diagnosed with cancer and are going through treatment for that. And I'm super excited about that. I have been working with kids since I was like a kid myself. I was like 12 or 13 when I got my first job as a baby ballet instructor. And ever since then have wanted to work with kids. And so I'm so excited to get to start my nursing career in the pediatric world and working with kiddos. I love Georgia, grew up here, but the Virginia mountains, they really stole my heart. And so I'm quite excited to stick around there. Found a really sweet church when I got to Liberty, and that's been a huge part of my life over the last going on 5 years living there. I actually just in the last year got to move onto the same street as my church and live in that community, which has just only grown my connectedness there, which is probably one of my favorite things about my little Lynchburg life.
And you're telling who you are. You're Gary and Janet Payton's daughter.
I am. That's a pretty important one.
That's important.
They're pretty much the best. And I've got 2 older brothers, Garrett and Walker. Also very important.
That you're hiking through Montana with next month.
In just a bit of time, we'll be backpacking through some of the most beautiful places ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you told us a little bit about...
I get diverted in these a lot.
Wonderful.
So Mary keeps me on track, so she
does
bring us
the same
back.
for me.
Yeah, she'll bring it back. For me.
Speaking of bringing us back, one of the things that you said that I want to bring us back to is the floor that you're going to be on. And you mentioned that you worked with kids since you were a kid, babysitting and teaching and all of that. Tell us a little bit more about this specific unit because it's a very specific floor that you're on and the job that you're going to be doing.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your story in terms of what gave you a heart and a passion for this particular floor and what you're going to be doing and why your heart was drawn towards this floor.
Yes, that is such a great question. So my story with nursing first began when sometime around middle school, I had a good friend, Kylie Myers, who passed away from childhood cancer. And we were good friends growing up through elementary school. But then after she passed, I actually got the opportunity to get really close with her older sister. We danced together. And there were a couple of years around 8th, 9th, and 10th grade that I spent a lot of time with her family and got to hear from her. And then also at that same time, my mom went through cancer as well and just got to experience the way that the nurses cared for the Myers family and my own family with so much graciousness and so much love and was so drawn to that. And so that was the very first time I kind of thought about being a nurse. But then as people would ask me what kind of nursing I wanted to do, and I would say the words, I want to be an oncology nurse, or like, I want to work with kids with cancer, that was often met by a well-intentioned, but sometimes poorly communicated, oh, that is going to be so hard. Oh, that's the hardest job ever. I could never do that. It's too sad. And so I kind of got intimidated by that response and was like, maybe I shouldn't do this. Like, maybe that's too much for me. Maybe I'm too emotional. And then as I was applying to jobs this past year, I actually didn't realize that the unit I was applying to housed that hospital's pediatric oncology unit until after I had accepted the job. And I remember sitting in my bedroom and I was like talking with the Lord, and I was like, Lord, you remembered a dream that I had way back when I was in middle school. And I didn't even remember it. Like, I didn't even remember that this was part of the reason I wanted to be a nurse, was to get to work with kids and with families who are dealing with such a long-term suffering that is walking through a cancer journey. But you remembered, and like, you have created me to do this in this season. And so I'm so excited to not just get to love on those kiddos who are going through treatment, but to get to love on their families. Like, I've been the family member of someone with cancer. And so to get to love on their siblings and their parents and explain what's going on and just get to be there for them and walk their hand through a hospital stay that isn't one and done, but that requires a lot of just long-term care, is so, so exciting to me. And just like so special, like that God remembers our dreams even when we don't. I just like, that has been such a testimony of his goodness to me in the last couple months.
Can I bring up something?
Yes,
We
please.
say this a lot in our podcast because we're about helping people find their place in life and ministry. And as probably most people know that watch this, place is an acronym, and the E is experiences of life. And if you listen to your story right there, we say a lot, if you want to know what the future is for your life, go back and look at your past, and it will often guide you.
Yeah.
And I'm not surprised at all that, see, I looked at your spiritual gifts before we came tonight because you had taken it. I think back when we did the podcast forever ago, you had taken it online. Do you know what your lowest spiritual gift? And you scored, like, you had several that were 8, which were your lowest scores. You know what one of them was? Mercy. So I'm not surprised that someone who's had a life experience of the 2 that you shared, God gave you a dream, but it won't be so hard on you because while you can, we'll talk about your personality because I looked at it too. You can feel, but some people can't walk away from it. You're going to be able to do what you need to do, but a lot of people with mercy, they walk out of the hospital and they carry all that hurt and all that, whereas you'll be able to be empathetic in the moment, but then you'll be able to probably walk out.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Can you attest to that? Because I know y'all have spent like hours and hours in clinicals and your preceptorship. With what he described about that, can you attest to that at all in your experience?
Yeah, I actually can. So last fall, I worked in an ICU at a local hospital up in Virginia. And during one of my clinicals, we did a code on a patient, which means we did CPR and other things. And through a manner of different situations, the patient ended up passing away. And
real life?
In real life.
Oh,
yes,
wow.
Sir.
And you're doing like, okay.
Yeah, wild. But I was involved in that situation from the nursing perspective. And I remember that day leaving the hospital, and I went on a walk by myself, and I was just kind of thinking and praying, and I was like, wow, I feel burdened for their family. Their family got to be there and say goodbye. And of course, like, that is always tragic to experience, just like sharing human suffering with other people. And yet at the same time, I was going on my walk and I was like, and I'm going to go home and I'm going to eat dinner and I'm going to go to bed and I'm going to wake up tomorrow and I'm going to go back to the hospital and I'm okay.
Yeah.
I as you said, I feel so much compassion and empathy for this family. And I also know that our healthcare team made the right decisions for this patient, and the family ended up making the right decision. And truly, this was the will of the Lord. And I'm confident in that. And even though it's tragic, because of the role I was playing in the situation, I'm able to grieve in the moment and move forward with my life. And truthfully, most crucially, move forward with caring for the other patients who are on that unit. Because the reality of nursing is that it's never one-on-one, you and one patient. There's always more people to care for. And so you're so right that I think the Lord did give me that ability to be involved in the emotions of what's going on in this one case, but then also be able to have that broader vision of like, there are other people to care for and there are other aspects of life. And I think that helps me to sort of to move through those emotions, to keep trucking through my shift, and then also to recover well after.
One of the things you used to phrase, grieve in the moment. I looked at your personality too. You're an I personality.
Yes.
That's your predominant personality. And one of the qualities of the I is they live in the moment. And they're good in the moment. I mean, I's are really good at making people feel important, but I's do have that ability. And obviously any trait can be a strength and it can be one that isn't. But I love that phrase you said, as a strength, I can, especially in what you're going, the profession you're in, I can live in the moment. And I'm going to go home, and in the moment, I'm going to eat.
Yes.
And this isn't ugly, but you're going to move on.
Yes.
Not stay.
Yes.
Because if you carry it too much, and that's why a lot of people can't deal with professions like nursing, is that it is just too heavy on them and they can't walk away.
Yeah.
And they just live in the past with what happened. So, but I love that you said live in the moment, which is so in tune with your personality.
It truly is.
Yeah.
And I love that you brought that up too, because that's honestly the same thing, that concept of being able to be in the moment as a strength. Because as you were listening, we listened to the same thing. And that's one thing that we talk about in coaching sessions and on the podcast all the time, is that a lot of times people will speak through the lens of their personality. And you heard that, and I heard that, and we heard it and got to see it as one of your strengths. And you were able, obviously, to articulate that for yourself. And we heard it as something that we see through like the lens like of your personality, of your experience, of evidence of your walk with the Lord, of being able to bring that to him and articulate that with him. And again, I think it's evidence, it's speaking towards one of your strengths that we can listen towards and see in you, is that ability to live in the moment and not be caught up in a moment in the past. Because one of the things I also love that you said is that there are more people, there are more moments that I need to step into. And even when you look at your profile, you're much more people-oriented than task-oriented. And even
I think it was 13 on the people side, 3 on the task side.
Yes.
If I remember the scores correctly.
Yes. It was about 85% people, 13% task. But what I also would say is balanced by that is on that graph, there's also active and reserved. Active being the decision making, the active, the wanting to go, the wanting to do. And then the reserved being the more contemplative, being the more conscientious and reflective. And so I think that balance gives you a good balance to be able to.
You were 8 and 8 on those scores, active and reserved, by the way.
Yes.
Which, I relate to both of those attitudes so much.
Yes. And I think that balances you to be able to, it's not like you heartlessly move on from the moment. You reflect, that's that 50%.
Yeah.
But then you also have that other 50 that allows you to go do for the next person and go walk into their moment and be in their moment and see them. And I think when we talk about it all the time, there's ways that your personality and your gifts will interact and influence. There's ways that you will have strengths and weaknesses. And when you look at someone, you can look at both their strengths and weaknesses, but how their strengths almost build up and fill in the gap of their weaknesses sometimes. And the way that you're wired and the way that we see it in our profile, but the way that you can articulate that
in real life
and give words and give experience to the place profile and how they match up together when you know how to look at them and interpret them. But I love how you phrase that and how you were able to articulate that and how it's a reflection of your personality, but it's you giving real life language just to what is affirmed on paper by the profile, which I thought was just so well worded as usual. As usual. But I want you to tell us a little bit more about life in Lynchburg. I've heard about it a lot, and you spoke a little bit about your community and your church. And I know that was a big reason. Obviously, you had this incredible job that you accepted, but you chose to commute there and stay in Lynchburg just because of this beautiful little life that you created there and that you found. So tell us a little bit about like the ins and outs of it and what you love about it, what kept you there.
Oh, I would love to. This is one of my favorite things to talk about. So Lynchburg is a really interesting city. So it's a city on a river. It's a port city. And so it's really old, like back before roads or boats could like go on the river. So it was like, it's just been around forever. And there's a railroad that goes through there, all these things. Well, then 50 something odd years ago, Liberty University pulls up and begins to build that university in the same city. And so there's just this really interesting dynamic between Liberty professors, students, all of the people that attracts to Lynchburg, meshed with Lynchburg natives or just like people who have grown up there, whose families have lived there forever. And sometimes the way that those communities interact is really beautiful and wonderful. And sometimes they absolutely clash. And so I had the opportunity to move into a house that is located in a really old part of Lynchburg. And it is an area that is more impoverished and definitely not like the suburban neighborhood that I grew up in, which I'm so grateful for that part of my life and my childhood. But it has been so eye-opening and so moving and honestly formational for me to live in this area among people whose external need matches their internal need. It has been so
well said.
It has been so beautiful and so clarifying, truly. So I moved in there about a little over a year ago. And at the time that I moved in, I was reading this book called The Gospel Comes with a House Key. And essentially the book is all about radical hospitality, which is
your number one spiritual
gift.
20 out of 20.
And so I read this book right as I moved into this community and was so convicted by the way the author talks about the hospitality of Jesus. And she has this line in the book where she says, I believe that the Lord never gets the address wrong. And it's essentially this call to like love your literal neighbors, like the honest people who live around you. And I just like took that and ran with it and baked a bunch of muffins and wrote a bunch of notes with my name and phone number and literally ran all over my neighborhood, giving them to people. And it was slow and steady work, but slowly over the course of a couple of months, I began to gain trust and build friendships and build relationships with the people in my community who are so different than me and who have lived lives and come from cultures that are so different than my own. But there's a shared trust, and I've learned how to give help and receive help from them, and ended up having some roommates move in a couple months later and just like got to invite them in.
Did they read the book too?
They haven't. Okay. They haven't, but I've given them lots of synopsis.
Okay. And they're just living it, kind of what it's talking about. Okay.
Yeah. So I just got
a little more important to live it than to read it, right?
Very true.
Yeah.
And so got to invite them into that. And our house has truly just become a gathering place. I mean, I would say it is not an exaggeration to say that at least 3 or 4 times a month, my home is full of anywhere from 10 to 16 or 17 people, and there's a pot of soup on the stove or a chicken roasting in the oven, or someone is setting the table, the boys are building a fire, and we're just inviting people to come and eat and be together. We love to host conversation, and we've gotten to host a couple of friends who are missionaries talking about the countries that they've lived in or visited, and have nights of prayer and worship. And I also, as I said earlier, happen to live a block away from my local church. And my local church is really passionate about loving our local community really well. And so I've just gotten to partner with them in that in a new way of like, these are not just neighbors of my church. They're my neighbors. Like, this is my neighborhood. And it's been such a unique opportunity to take responsibility for the literal dining room table that the Lord has given me and the literal house he's given me, and just invite people into that as best as I can and as best as I'm able. So that's just been a huge part of my life. The other part of my Lynchburg life is the loving kiddos theme is just rings true in every area of my life. I love our families. I get to teach our kids ministry on Sunday mornings. So I get to teach the Bible lesson, which is probably one of my favorite things I get to do every week. The way that children, the best word I can say is like metabolize God's word, the way that they take it in and process it. And I get to watch it click in their brain that Jesus loves them and that these stories are all true. And that is like truly one of the biggest honors of my life, is getting to experience that with them and then tell the stories of how the kingdom of heaven is coming in the littlest of us.
Hannah, I'm pretty old and I don't hear a lot of phrases that are like wow phrases. Did you catch a phrase? Metabolize God's word. I have never heard that. Is like, I've never heard that. I'm going to go back and
that might be a Hannah original.
Hannah, that is, in the way you framed it, it was like, wow.
I told you we needed to get her back on the podcast.
I'm telling you. And we can probably do a whole segment on we just did a new resource on gifts, and you talk about Hannah with the gift of hospitality, and we got a whole new set of material. Wow. Wow. Sorry, I just got blown away with listening to your story.
Thank you.
The hospital was cool, but hearing you talk about where you live and knowing that you have that gift of hospitality and how you're using it, and it's really cool. So
the Lord truly writes the best
but
stories.
I'm not surprised because I've known you a pretty long time.
That you have. I actually tell this story often when people ask me about hospitality. You probably don't even remember this. There was one day I was at your house and Mary, I don't know where Mary was, but she wasn't there. But you and I were sitting at the kitchen table, and you pulled up my spiritual gifts. And at the time, I was really struggling with serving in the church in a lot of areas that I wasn't actually gifted in. Mm-hmm. And I was feeling the tension of that. And I said something about that to you, and you looked at my spiritual gifts and you were like, Hannah, your top spiritual gift is hospitality. Like, you know that you can say no when people ask you to do things for the sake of serving where the Lord has asked you to serve. And that was the first time anyone ever said that to me. And I just like didn't know that I could have the authority to like tell people what my gifts are and to choose how I like serve the church. And that has carried through, and that just like stuck in my brain so much. And in each new season since then, I remember that conversation and I think like, I know what my spiritual gifts are, but these people don't know them. And so how can I, with loving and kindness, tell them what they are for the sake of us partnering well together?
Do you know what I remember about that conversation? And it may have been one of my learning experiences too. Mary has a friend at her church, Brooke, who's also very articulate, I personality. And sometimes with I personalities that are charismatic, people just think you can do anything. You're articulate, you can talk about things. So people think you can do anything. And that's what I remember about that conversation is that no, not only can't you do everything, you're not fulfilled doing everything.
Yes.
So, thank you. That's a good affirmation for me. And that was a lot of years. I mean, like 5, 6, 7, 5, 6 years ago,
I was
maybe?
Probably 17.
Yeah.
When we had that conversation.
Yeah, so 5 years ago. Wow. Mm-hmm. Mary, we're getting really diverted, and you've got questions there. So
well, no, see, this is why I love Where the Spirit Leads, because I didn't know about that conversation. And I knew about some of the changing of seasons of your experience with church. And I knew exactly what you were doing in high school. I knew how even the way you serve your community and the way you're involved in church, how that has evolved over time. I had no idea that it was related to an experience and a conversation that you had with my dad, but with someone who affirmed the way that you were wired and the way that you were gifted, and how even just the role that played and how you evaluated your experience, but also how you evaluated new opportunities and how it gave you the freedom to be able to say no and the confidence to say yes. Because I knew the backstory of the yeses that you were giving out.
Yes.
And I didn't know some of the conversations that shifted those experiences, your evaluation of them, but also that shifted where you started to give your yes to, and how the power of even just a conversation with someone who did know how you were gifted. And that because you said, they don't know how I'm gifted, but I can tell them and I need to tell them. But even someone else who either saw that in you by listening or saw that in you on paper, like through an assessment, that was able to give you the affirmation, to give you the confidence to be able, because you were starting to realize that about yourself, that this isn't how I'm gifted, but I'm giving my yes out everywhere. So even sometimes knowing something about yourself is not enough to give us the confidence to speak into it and step into it. Sometimes you need the affirmation and validation from someone else who also sees it in you to give you the confidence to attach thought with your endeavor and walk into that.
Oh, by the way, I had a new thought sitting here that I'm gonna really do this. Okay, so whenever y'all were on vacation, y'all did a little family vacation this past week, and your dad is always so gracious to me and ask if I'm available to teach the young singles group that he and your mom lead. And you know what I'm going to do next time? I'm going to use this conversation. We have a new building, all this new technology in our church with screen, and I'm going to put this up and let them watch our podcast together, because the things you're saying are just, they're power life experiences guiding you, giftings, and how you're using your gifts in your church now, in your community. And there's just so many life lessons, direction lessons, listening to what you're saying in this. So, yeah.
And
so I'll let you know, y'all can dial in, because we can Zoom we'll let y'all dial in wherever you are.
Wonderful.
And your dad can give the input because he's the teacher in there every week. Yeah.
I love it.
He can give the commentary.
That's wonderful.
So truthfully, there are so many questions that I feel like we could keep talking about, and so many different things that we could dive into. And one of the things that we've been talking about on our recent podcast episodes are how your personality influences your spiritual gifts, and even how those two and how they interact will influence what you do and how you do them. And we've talked already about how your spiritual gifts, you see that in the way you serve your community, the way you serve your friends, the way that you even serve in your calling and in your vocation. So talk to us a little bit about how the way that you do ministry in your community and at your church, how you see certain parallels that you're going to bring into your job as a nurse.
That is such a great question. Some things I love about, honestly, hospitality in general. So I guess this is really in my relationship with my neighborhood, with my neighbors and my community, is that hospitality is so much about setting the table and then allowing the Spirit and the Lord to move as He desires, truly, and to bring up the things that need to be brought up, and to have the conversations that are needed. And I think that sort of framework of life is something I really hope to bring into the hospital, of my nursing tasks and the jobs that I do to keep my patients safe and to help them physically heal, is sort of my version of setting the table in the hospital. But the hope is that I set the table well so that conversations can be fostered that go beyond just physical health, and that go beyond just the connection of nurse and patient, but that allow for moments of honest compassion and honest connection, and Lord willing, the opportunity to share the love of Jesus. What a gift that would be. Not just with my patients, but I think something I've been especially burdened for in the last couple months leading up to my job is like the people who I'm going to be doing this alongside, my coworkers. I was homeschooled growing up and went to a Christian college and have existed primarily in Christian spaces for most of my life. And so this will, to be completely honest, be one of my first fully immersive experiences in a context that's primarily secular and is not Christian by name at all. And I'm so excited for the challenge that will be for me, and really hope that in not just being a good nurse for my patients, but in being a good team player and like being a good helper and a good learner from the people around me and the nurses around me, that will also present the opportunity to love my coworkers. And I am just so hopeful that the way I've learned to be unashamed about the gospel with my neighbors and to be unashamed about the gospel with the kids that I'm nannying or teaching on Sunday morning will flow into my work life, that I might be unashamed about the gospel at my job. I just in entering and graduating, I'm sure you have experienced this, Mary, and entering that sort of post-grad season of life with all of my friends starting jobs and me as well. I think it's easy in our sort of work-life balance, and almost, I think we can just get into this almost like separation of church and state mindset. And I'm just praying against that. Honestly, I'm so hopeful that interacting with unbelievers every day would only further my urgency to share the gospel and not quiet it. But I think one way to build that connection and to build that bridge is to be a good nurse and to do my work well. And so in sort of very different tasks, but that same heart posture that I've learned in walking more in hospitality of like, set the table well, prepare the meal well, so that goodness and life might come from the conversations and the human connection. I'm so hopeful that I get to experience that in the hospital.
You said a word probably 4 or 5 times. And I want to say, you will do this. You used the word, I want to be good. Hannah, you're going to be good at whatever you do. And you are going to bring life in your Christian faith, no matter where you are or what you do, and you're going to be good at what you do. So I've been watching you for a long time. And as we come to the end, one of the things I would just say, it's fun to watch people through different stages of life.
Yeah.
And I don't know where you'll be 5 years from now or 10 years, but I do remember when I first met you, you wanted to go be overseas. And now it sounds like in the neighborhood, you wanted to do missions. And the way you just described it, where you live now, is so different than the culture of what you grew up in, where you grew up in, where you're about to go to work is so different from the culture of what you were raised in, mostly in a Christian context around Christian folk. You're going to get to be a missionary right there in Lynchburg. You already are in your neighborhood, but now as you go to work in a secular environment and you get to take Jesus in that environment, it's just going to be fun to watch this coming year, the next 5 years, and see where you end up. But I'm going to tell you something. You're going to take Jesus wherever you go, because I've watched you for long enough to know that that's who you are. That's my final word on that, Mary.
First of all, thank you for being here today and sharing so much of your wisdom. I will attest as your friend in all of the many conversations that we have all the time, that every time we get to talk, I can see the love of Jesus shine through you, and it's a testimony of the time that you spend with him, because it's an outpouring of what is poured into you in the time that you spend with him. And that's why I wanted to have you on this episode, on this podcast, is because I knew that would shine through to the other people who are listening, and that there would be a nugget of truth, a nugget of encouragement or wisdom that they would be able to glean from your words, because those who encounter you, whether it be through a podcast, through a one-on-one conversation at the hospital, around your table at your church, I know those who encounter you, they encounter a glimpse of Jesus because you reflect the person you spend so much time with. And like you said, whatever you do, wherever you go, there will be that outpouring of his presence and his love. And the way that you're wired, your personality, your spiritual gifts, we can talk all about how the Lord has wired you and how he has gifted you so beautifully, as he does with all of us, and how that can be an affirmation and validation of what you're doing and what he's calling you to. And we can look at your whole place profile and look at your life experiences and how that informed who and what you're passionate for, and how you're going to use your gifts and how that's influenced by your personality, and you're going to be so effective and you're going to be more fulfilled because you're serving in ways that you're gifted, and you have given such beautiful language for that. And I think the game changer, we say life experiences are one of the game changers in the place experience. One of the life experiences, I think, for you that are one of the most evident things is the time that you spend with Jesus, because that has influenced everything you've said. It's influenced every aspect of your life. And that's what I think is even more beautiful than how he's wired you, but it's that you're always going back to the person that did design you, and that he is the thing that you reflect even more than how you're wired. He reflects in that, and you reflect how he designed you, but you reflect your designer more so even than you reflect your design, because you spend so much time with him, and your focus and your heart and your affections are focused on him so often. It's evident in the way you talk, the way you carry yourself. So I'm excited for everyone in Lynchburg. I'm a little jealous, I'll be honest, that you're staying there, but I'm so excited for everyone who will get to encounter that, because they're encountering a reflection of the person you spend the most time with, which is Jesus.
Yeah.
So I hope that rained through for all of y'all on this podcast episode. If you enjoyed it, if you felt encouraged by it, share it with your friends, listen to it again. I'm probably going to listen to it again and take some of my own notes on it. But thank y'all again so much for joining us, and we hope to see you back here next time.